Hey, good evening, folks. Mitch Taco Bell. I'm your host for Tall Tales with Taco. This is exciting. Episode 68 is with a good friend of mine, Rich Ned Rierson. For those of you that watch Groundhog Day and know who Ned Rierson is, with a last name like that, unfortunately, Rich got stuck with that call sign, which is good. I mean, he fits Ned. I love it. And he is probably one of the most well connected versatile guys I know in terms of a Marine who demonstrates overcome, adapt, improvise. It's going to be a great show tonight because Rich is going to tell us about his background, tell us what happened, and how he launched into one of the most successful programs. If you have a chance to listen to a Dose of Leadership, it's on Apple Podcast. You will love it. I just all of his interviews. You sit there and you're going, how does he meet these guys? Hey, Rich, hook me up. Now his agent says he's too big for that now, but that's okay. I'm just kidding. Hey, I'd like to bring on Rich Ryerson. Ned, how are you, brother?
Hey, good man. Well, thank you for bringing me on the show.
Are you
What
kidding?
an
We've been
honor.
talking about doing this for a while, and I know that if my buddy Randy Norfleet, former OSO from Oklahoma City, who was also involved in the Oklahoma City bombing, I'd like to get
Yeah.
him on the show. But you're OSO from back in the 90s. Well, not your original OSO, but the guy that took care of you, right?
Yeah, he became the OSO right after I got commissioned actually, but he really hooked me up when I went to TBS, and then I was engaged at that time, so I went to TBS, and that 6 months basically planned my wedding, or my wife did, and I just sent my measly TBS checks to her to fund the wedding. but, but Randy was the OSO then, and he let me come back basically for 30 days as his assistant. So, and I didn't have to burn up any leave. So basically, I had 30 days off when I got out of TBS to kind of get married and get everything squared away before we moved to Pensacola. And basically, I just had to check in Oklahoma City, and then he sent me up to Wichita. He said, "Yeah, go hand out some flyers once a week, and we'll call it good." You
Yeah.
know?
Head to Wichita. Here's what you do: put on your Charlies, go walk around campus.
Yeah,
Act cool, and just get me some names. That's my
yeah,
OSO. My OSO now the commandant of the Marine Corps, Dave Berger comes up. He goes, "All right, listen up. All I want you to do, you little knuckle dragging idiots, is walk around campus, look sharp, and talk everybody up, and get me their names. And I expect 10 names and phone numbers."
yeah, right.
It's
Yeah,
but they had to be worthwhile, to make
yeah.
that worthwhile for him.
Well, I mean, that meant a lot for me to Randy do that. It was kind of one of the first examples how, I mean, kind of Marines taking care of other Marines. He didn't know me from Adam, and
Yeah.
he hooked me up, and I guess we made it legit. I'd check in with him, every other day or so, and he called it good.
Well,
But
what's
it was
funny is, do you think perhaps him also being a KC-130 guy, did that influence you a little bit when you were going through flight school and the selection process?
no, and that's what's funny is that I didn't even I can't even remember him telling me he was a Herc guy. Because to be quite honest, when I was going through flight school, I didn't know
Mhm.
anything about the Herc community, and it was almost through like kismet or fate that I got it. Because when I signed up, I think with all of us, what's the famous line from Officer and Gentleman? My grandmother wants to fly jets. We all wanted to fly jets and be fighter guys because we're all influenced by Top Gun, like all of us were, right? We all
Yeah.
signed up because we wanted to be that guy. But it's funny when you get into flight school, at least it was for me, when you're on the ground and looking at and watching a guy do loop-de-loops and all this stuff, you're like, oh my God, and again, I wasn't one of those guys that hung out at an FBO when I was a kid and made balsa wood airplanes. I couldn't even tell you what airplanes were. I wasn't one of
Yeah.
those guys. But I always wanted to be a pilot. And then when I became one, and I was like, that would be cool. I want to do that. And I would read these
Mhm.
books. I remember in college, I would read these books, all these about these Vietnam pilots and this and that. And I'm like, God, I want to be one. And I just knew I was going to be one. It was weird. It was like one of those things I knew I was going to be one. It's hard to
Mhm.
explain now, but I always knew I would be. And then it happened. And then, but when you start doing it, as you know, I mean, it's loud, it's nauseating, doesn't smell good. Initially it's hot, it's stressful as all hell. At least it was for me,
Oh, yeah, it's
and
the
I
hardest
got
thing I've ever done in my
yeah,
life.
and I got airsick, and what shocked me that I got airsick, and I was puking the first, I don't know, 5, 6 flights, and then I finally got over it. I didn't have to go I didn't never go to the spin and puke or any of that other stuff, but I got over it
Mhm.
to the max. If I took a lot of time off, I'd get sick again, so I had to just keep doing it, but I just remember that kinda spooked me about going jets. It was weird, right? And to be quite honest too, like, I would go visit, like, a couple of the jet squadrons and stuff, and it wasn't my personality, and I wanted it to be, but it wasn't. And then I remember I was getting close to winging, and I did really good. I had really good grades. The week I was graduating, I was gonna graduate number 2, but where I really kicked ass was in the instruments. I didn't do so hot
Mhm.
in the visual stuff because I was sick a lot, and I was kinda spooked by it. But then I started getting my groove, and I just knocked it out of the park in instruments. I mean, just getting almost perfect flights, and I had really good grades. I was graduating number 2, and it's like the top 3 guys you could get whatever you wanted was kind of the at the time.
Yeah.
And I was on, one of those last line of out and backs, those little cross countries where, you're gonna graduate. You're just kinda going out in the real world, getting a burrito at some FBO, then coming back. And when we got a chip light somewhere out in Bruton, Alabama, I think we were. And so we were broke, and they were gonna send a helicopter TH-57 to come pick us up on their low level and bring us back because our plane was hard down. And so we were sitting there for a couple hours, and this instructor I was talking with, he was a Cobra guy. I
Mhm.
forget his name. I have to look in his logbook. I'm gonna look him up because
Was
it
he
was because
Corpus
of
or
he
Pensacola?
is this was Pensacola, it's up in Whiting. And so we're sitting at this FBO, and I'd flown with him a handful of times. And he goes, "So Rich, what are you gonna fly, man? What are you gonna pick? You're gonna select next week." He goes, "You got kick-ass grades." He goes, "What are you gonna pick?" And I'm like, and I think I was just trying to impress him more than be honest. But I was like, "I don't know. I think I wanna fly something with guns, I wanna be a Cobra guy like you." And he's like, yeah, just I don't know. I was just trying to convince myself. And he gave me the best advice. He goes, Rich, he goes, I've flown with you a lot. And he goes, you're a really good guy. He goes, you're going to be a great officer. You're going to be a great aviator. He goes, but you got the grades, dude. And I fly Cobras. I love Cobras, but
You're not a meat
I
eater.
yeah, well, it's not that I wasn't a meat eater. It was that he goes, it's just such a rough life. He goes, you got to fly your personality. And he goes, have
Yeah.
you thought about flying KC-130s? I go, I don't know anything about it. I don't know any instructors here. I haven't seen any. He goes, well, the reason why is because they're all flying their ass off, going all over the world. It's the best kept secret in the Marine Corps. They never go on a boat. They fly all over the place. They fly, tons of hours. And then they're set up for the airlines if they want to get out, if they don't want to make it a career. And he goes, that's why all of us Cobra guys are here at Whiting trying to build up our fixed wing time so we can have
So we get
options when
hired.
we get done with it. And he goes, dude, you got the grades. He goes, they only give out at the time, they were giving out like 20 a year or something. So it wasn't
Yeah.
even every week, right? It was like every other week or every 3 weeks. And he goes, dude, I'd put it down. And he goes, you got the grades. He goes, you got to put jets down, dude. You got it. He goes, you got jet grades. So I put props, jets, helos in that order, and I got props the next week.
For
And if
for
he hadn't
for
had that
folks
conversation, if I hadn't had that conversation, I wouldn't have picked it. And it was the best thing I did because the Herc fit me like a glove. I mean, the community fit
yeah.
me like a glove. Everything it was the best thing that ever happened to me.
For everybody out there, when you go through flight school and it's grueling 6, 8 months and you get done, you're sitting in this room and based off of your grades, based off the needs of the Marine Corps and what you want, that's what our guy did. He came in, he goes, it's based off of 3 criteria. It's based off your grades, based off the needs of the Marine Corps, and what you want. And so
Right.
and so he's
Yeah.
holding up his middle finger. I'm sorry about that. Sorry. Yeah. I was giving him the finger. Sorry. So based off your needs, what you wanted, the number one guy, I was number 3. The number one guy, Andy Dingy, put jets, props, helos. The number 2 guy, all he ever talked about since TBS, the basic school, we're out there in the woods, all he ever wanted, Cobras, want to SWAC guys. I just want a 20 millimeter below my chin. I just want to shoot guys. I mean, that's what he talked about.
Mhm.
Helos, helos, helos. And then I was number 3 and I put props, jets, helos. And so what happened was that he selected jets, he got jets, he got helos, and they gave me props. And then the rest of the guys, 15 guys, no matter what, they all went helos, and which is amazing to me because helos I've flown a couple times. That is the hardest damn thing in the world
Yeah, yeah,
to
it
do.
is. I've tried
And
to
your
fl
quote, yeah, you quote, given the bottom of the class helos when it in fact is harder than flying a fixed wing,
Yeah.
in my opinion, my humble opinion.
Well, I actually think it'd probably be more fun to fly because it's actually
Mhm,
it's like the true sense of flying. Like you can stop, hover, go, you're low, and it's you get a better sense of flying. But you're right,
mhm.
and I was going to be happy with it. But it's funny though when you sign up for the Marine Corps for the aviation program, they don't tell you that you have a 60 right out of the gate. You got a 60% plus chance of getting a helo anyway, no matter what grades you get, right?
Right.
Because
I heard
it's
it was
just the way the
12%
numbers fly.
props, 30%
Yeah.
jets, and then the rest
The rest
helos.
is helos. I mean, that's a huge percentage of you getting a chance of you getting a helicopter, which is
Yeah.
fine, because I loved it. I mean, I loved at the time when I think back to the mentality of where I was, even the TBS. I think if I would have lost my flight contract, I was at the point I wouldn't have cared. I would have done anything in the Marine Corps, to be quite honest. I loved it that much when I was
Well,
in it.
you know, it's they when they tell you that, and you get C-130s when they said props. I honestly, I go to the gym. I'm working out after I selected, and I got props, and I see Ray Deschanel. You remember him?
Yeah,
Triple A
Haji.
Ray,
Yeah. Hmm.
Haji. So Haji is working out, so I go up and saddle up next to him because he got props, and I'm
Yeah.
like, Haji, man, I'm so excited. I got props. I can't wait to be a Blue Angel. And he goes, "What are you talking about?" And I thought, I mean, because there was no Google back then. I mean,
Yeah.
the only C-130s that you ever saw was Fat Albert flying around with
Yeah.
the Blue Angels, and I'd seen him at air shows. So I thought, wow, I got part of the squadron. I'll be flying Blue Angels.
Yeah. Right.
Little did I know what
Yeah.
life would be like. But so we got you going from the Marine Corps after a great time flying the Marine Corps, and then an instructor in the Air Force
Mhm.
to the airlines. You finally make your dream job. And I just
Yeah.
was blessed to get on a little bit before you in
Yeah.
'98. But that this is the meat of the program. You
Yeah.
you you get your job, and then 9/11 happens. Go take it from there.
Yeah, so, as you alluded to, the last tour in my Marine Corps, the Marines, after you do your fleet tour, they want you to do some career enhancing non-flying tour.
Yeah.
And my career enhancing non-flying tour was a flying tour with the Air Force as a tweet instructor. So that was really fun. And I flew a lot and built up my hours in a rapid fashion because I was flying 3 flights a day, and it was good work, and it was really rewarding. But all my peers, like you, were ahead of me, and just telling me they were in with the airlines, and they're telling me how great life was. And I was in the Marine Corps at the time, and I remember I was like, I'm just kind of tired of this. I'm tired of these long hours. The Marine Corps has been good to me, but I want to do something else. And I got that job at American. And you know how it is when it's a long process. I mean, you start a year and a half, sometimes 2 years prior to all this, and getting everything in order, and spending money on ATPs and all this other trash. And it's stressful, dude. And you
Yeah.
go down there, and it's like you get the call, and it's just 2 stressful days, from the physical to the psych eval to everything. Oh my God. And then you walk away and you think you did good. And I remember the time they had the gouge where you'd copy they had a FedEx envelope. They wanted you to fill out your address on. That was your package was going to be mailed to. So you copied that tracking number down so you could see if
Track
you were
it.
going to get, because if you got the job, they sent you the FedEx package. If you got the no, they'd send you a regular snail mail telling you, thanks for applying, but we're not interested. And so
You know what's
that kind
funny?
of,
I never got that. They
you
they
never
didn't
got
do
that
that.
gouge?
They
Oh
no,
yeah.
they didn't do that for us.
Yeah.
I
That's what,
literally, the day I was signing my DD-214, the sergeant goes, "Hey, sir, have you heard from anybody yet?" And I go, "Well, let me borrow your phone." You have one new voicemail, on my home machine. Beep. Hello, this is, Linda from
right.
Pilot Recruitment. We'd like to offer you a job. If you're still interested, please give us a call. 817-967, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And I pick up the phone call, and I got the job on the spot as I was signing my DD-214.
Yeah.
So I
That's
walked
funny
right
because
into the Marine
you
Corps.
got hired in '98, and the internet was still in its infancy in '98, but by 2001, when I got hired, at least that kind of gouge was out there, so you could at least do the
Yeah.
FedEx tracking. You could type it in and see. But and then when you get that envelope, and dude, I've never won the lottery, but that's what it felt like when you
Yeah.
got that envelope with that job offer, and it was so amazing, and you just felt like, oh my God, I'm set for life. I'm gonna do a job that I love, and I'm gonna be set financially, and you go there, and you know how it is, and they you bring your spouse or your significant other, and you're sitting there in the room, and the chief pilot walks in and tells you you're going to be a millionaire. It's heady stuff, man, right?
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah,
just like
and you're never gonna hear the word furlough. You'll make captain in
nothing.
5 years.
Yeah, all that stuff was there. And I remember in my interview, like, man, we're growing so fast, and there's not enough pilots to, what a great career you're going to have, and it was great. And then I went all the training through that summer of 2001, and I went to flight engineer school and finished my IOE, my last training, and signed off on September 8th, 2001. I had 3 days off, and September 11th was my first assignment. It started at noon in Dallas on September 11th. And so I commuted down that morning. My dad dropped me off at the Wichita airport, and I commuted down there as a non-rev employee and landed right at 8 a.m. Central Time. If you remember, that's when like the first plane hit the tower at like 7:51 Central Time or something like that, like 8:51 or 8:48 or something like that, East Time, whatever. But anyway, right when all this was happening at 8 a.m., we landed. And so we're taxiing in, and, no smartphones. I mean, I had a flip phone I had a little Nokia with just the numbers,
Mm-hmm.
And so we took forever to get to the gate at the A gates there. And we just stood there on the periphery. And he's like, the captain finally comes on and says, hey, they're trying to find a new gate for us. For some reason, they shut all the airspace down, and we can't they're not letting anybody leave. So they've got to find us a new gate. And so that was about 8:25. And finally they found us a new gate, 8:35. I rolled in and walked into the terminal there on the A terminal. And I remember there was a couple that was going to Cancun, had a tight connection. They were stressed. They were going to make their connection flight. And he was in front of me, and we turned to the left and looked at the monitor where all the flight information, gate information was. And it literally was like a movie. It was coming up, canceled, cancel, 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 cancel. I'm like, what is going on?
I thought there was TV's on.
There's a TGI Fridays right behind me. And it's just packed, and people are outside the barrier of TGI Fridays into the alleyway of the terminal. And it was a small TV screen, it wasn't the big flat screens. It was like a little 13-inch up in the corner, and I could see the tower and smoke. And I asked a guy next to me, like, hey man, what happened? He's like, oh, a little Cessna hit the Twin Towers. And I wasn't putting this cancellation thing and this together, because it was just so far out of your mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I walked up. There used to be an operations in the A terminal there, and it was upstairs. I don't know if you remember that ops there, but I walked up there, and some captain passed me on the stairs, just exasperated, flustered, and I was like, "That's weird." And I walked into ops, and man, everybody was in there. There's a big TV room with a big screen TV, and everybody's around. I caught the eye of one of my classmates. He's like, dude, one of them was ours. And I'm like, what are you talking about? That's when it all came clear. And then a few minutes later, the towers collapsed, and I was like, I just couldn't speak. I was like, what is happening? And my wife called me, and that was my indoctrination in the airlines. And so we had a crash pad, me and a couple of the classmates there, and hung out there for a few days. And then whenever they opened the airspace up 3 or 4 days later, I can't remember how many days it was, and I flew my first trip, and flew 6 more times, and was furloughed October 1st. And that was where I was thrust in the corporate arena. I had to reinvent myself, and it was because of that furlough. And I just remember thinking, my God, what am I going to do? All I know I do is fly airplanes, and there's nobody hiring. And I wasn't in a reserve unit. I wasn't in a guard unit. And so I started working in corporate America, just in regular jobs.
What was the epiphany, though, to come up with dose of leadership and to work that direction and build a business, and a very successful consulting business? What was that epiphany where you were sitting there How did that come about?
Well, it was a series of events. It wasn't one lightning bolt moment, but it came in short order. It's kind of a slow fade. It was in slow fade, maybe it was more rapid than slow. But I mean, even with that first job that I got as a shipping supervisor, right, I had to do something, and I got a job with the local manufacturer with the company that my dad worked at, and he was friends with the owner, and they'd known each other since the 60s. They introduced his best friend, and his wife introduced my mom and dad, and
That's
so
small. Yeah.
we knew them. And so I worked there in high school, and it was a lumber yard, but they grew into this manufacturing facility, and so they said, well, we'll have you start on as a shipping supervisor. We could use a guy back there, and $17 an hour, dude. And I'm like, well, I got to do something. And
Well, that was more than you're making on probation.
yeah, no kidding, right? Yeah, God Almighty, no doubt. But anyway, I started October 15th. I think I started there in 2001, and it hit me in short order as I started working with the small team that I was assigned, and I thought, well, I can figure this out. It's shipping and receiving, right? And I get the gist of it. And so I had a small little team of basically forklift drivers, and I was taught to supervise them. And I said, well, getting introduced to them, and I thought, oh, they're going to be impressed that I was a pilot and that I was an officer in the Marine Corps, and I'm going to tell them all this stuff, and they're going to be. But the second I met them, it was like, whoa, it was like I walked on the set of Sons of Anarchy, and it's like, here I am in my khaki Dockers and my stupid JCPenney polo shirt and my stupid Marine Corps haircut, and
Yeah.
And they're looking at me
like a fart in church.
Exactly, right. And that's what I think the first instant where it hit me of like the Marine Corps taught me. I didn't explicitly think of it at the moment, but as I marinated back on the experience, I started thinking of the lessons of the Marine Corps started coming out at that moment. And it was that, look, this isn't about you. They don't care about me. Just like you were told as a lieutenant, they don't care if you're the captain of the lacrosse team or not, the platoon sergeant and enlisted guys, they don't give a shit about that,
Right.
And the old adage, I remember I heard it somewhere in the Marine Corps is like, they won't care about you until that you care about them. And I learned that in the Marine Corps. And so I just told them, instead of telling them where I came from, I said, hey, I got a lot to learn, guys. And I don't know anything about shipping and receiving. I'm a sponge. I'm here to remove the obstacles for you, and just tell me what you need. And I remember there's a guy named Big John. I mean, he was big, 6'4", 230 plus, big old lumberjack beard, do-rag on his head, and sunglasses, and 2 teardrop tattoos, and live to ride to live. And he's like, what do you mean? What do we need, college boy? That's what he said. And I was like, but going up, it didn't really faze me, because that's what being in a Marine Corps Herc squadron was like, right? I mean, it was no different than that first flight, and that crusty old flight engineer sitting in the middle and kind of testing you. And that you had to have a thick skin, and you had to realize that, just on paper, hierarchically, I may be more responsible and have the leadership responsibility, but I'm the boot here, and if you had that humble, teachable spirit in the cockpit, but and the willingness to take that from all sides and give it back, that's how you fit in. And that's kind of, I just used that same example there. And this guy wanted a a magnetic dry erase board. And I didn't even really made him. And he said he'd been asking for one. And I said, what do you need it for? And he told me, and it's pretty brilliant what he needed it for. He was just kind of wanted a non-technical way to map out his third shift guys pull orders in the middle of the night. And he had 20 shipping and receiving doors. And, behind one door, you could have 3 separate orders from 3 different customers. And so the third shift guys are doing that all night. And then at 6 o'clock in the morning, when first shift comes in, and Walmart driver comes in and says, I'm here to pick up load XYZ. They got the guys walk. They don't know where it's at. And so they're walking the floor, and the Walmart driver's like, God, what kind of Mickey Mouse operation is this? You don't even know?
Yeah.
And he thought if he had a drive magnetic erase board with these little rectangular magnets and he marked off 20 locations, and then the third shift guys, when they put load XYZ and the second one back behind door 17, he could see it on his board. And I thought that's brilliant,
Yeah, it is.
And I got that for him. And 3 or 4 months later, and this guy, he was the platoon sergeant of that organization. He was the real influence, the real motor of that department.
Mhm.
He was the real influence, the influential leader. And he never saw it in himself, and no one ever told him. And I treated it like a lieutenant would treat his platoon sergeant. Behind the
Mhm.
scenes, I'd be like, okay, dude, what do I got to do here? Like the brand new lieutenant would do.
Mhm.
And he's like, dude, you got to do this, do that. And I took care of him, and he saw it. And he told me 3 or 4 months later, he's like, dude, you're the first guy that ever asked me in 16 years, what is I needed? And that just blew me away. And so that started the process of, and just a series of everyday interactions in the corporate arena, like that, those little lessons. And you saw
Mhm.
it everywhere where, I'm pushing the organization to listen to this $8 an hour spot welder on the floor. He's got a better way to do it. And the mindset of some of the owners and the people that had the degrees and everything else, they weren't listening to him. And I would be the guy pushing to listen to him because he knows better than I do. And
Sure.
it was just the whole leaders, all that stuff just started coming to fruition. And I would talk to my friends who were furloughed, other Marine officers, and they were working in corporate America. And we would share these kind of war stories about how these multi-million-dollar organizations that we're working for, we just assumed if you knew you were that successful, that you had this basic tenet or this basic philosophy of leadership under your belt. And to me, it wasn't the case. It was like, God, they're successful and they're dysfunctional. How more successful could they be if they just had the basics of leadership down? And that's really, it was it was a 16-year process that I worked in corporate America. And it was I would get in, a lot of HR folks, a lot of CEOs. I didn't make a lot of friends. We butted heads, and I guess I treated it like the Marine Corps, and it just through all that process of gnashing teeth, seeing some successes, and obviously I've made a lot of mistakes along the way, but I served 10 years active duty in the Marine Corps, and every day since I got furloughed on October 1st, 2001, the Marine Corps served me in spades every single day. There's not one day that the Marine Corps has not served me, not one. And that's how much I believe in it. And so that's a really long answer, but it's a cliff note. There's a lot in between there. And it really around 2007, 2008 is kind of when it started coming into fruition. And where I officially got paid to talk about leadership. And it's just, I haven't
Yeah.
really looked back ever since.
So when you walk into an auditorium full of managers or directors, do you go up there and write the 14 leadership traits?
No,
Justice, judgment,
no,
dependability, integrity, decisiveness, tact, initiative, enthusiasm, bearing use. Do you do that? I mean, I could
no,
see
I
you
don't.
sitting there writing that across the board. We learned it. JJ did tie
JJ
buckle,
Die
but
Buckle. Yeah, no, I mean, I certainly incorporate all of those things in the Marine Corps, but I don't treat it like I don't teach it like we were taught it, like sitting
yeah,
down and like here's just, but I certainly incorporate all of those things. To me, the things that have been, I think, where my specialization is, or what I'm most passionate about, and what I've seen the most success trying to help people do, was understand the concept of decentralization. It's such a powerful concept in the Marine Corps that I took for granted, but it is probably from a corporate or a business world, real life practical application. I mean, even in your personal life, I may even try to do this with my family, but I mean,
yeah,
is to push the leadership responsibility throughout the entire organization of getting everybody to think and act like a leader. That's what the Marine Corps excels at, right? When they're firing in all cylinders, and when I saw it working at its best, and it wasn't always perfect. I mean, because there's human beings in there. Not every human being's perfect or even understands it in the Marine Corps.
exactly.
But you do run across some fantastic leaders who do get it, and I learned a lot from those who drove home this concept of creating a culture of decentralized leadership, and that means you've got to push the leadership responsibility throughout the entire organization so that everybody thinks and acts like a leader with varying degrees of accountability based on their roles and their level of what they're responsible for. But regardless, just like you were taught in the Marine Corps, and you and I weren't infantry, but we worked with guys who were in infantry. We were around those meat eaters that did that stuff, and those are the ones that really excel at it. And the Marine Corps, the business that they're in is combat, and it's chaos. It's the ultimate in chaos.
But can you think clearly through the fog of war and the chaos to make that snap correct decision? Same thing we do flying an airplane every day.
Yeah.
People can quarterback us Monday morning, quarterback us all they want. But at that time, your butt in the seat, did you make the right decision? And I remember a statistic years ago when I was on recruiting duty about the top Fortune 500 companies. The top leaders in there were Vietnam combat vets and a majority Marines.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Fred Smith. By God, we were just talking about him last week. But
the ability to thrive. That you're right. I mean, and it's the combination of that decentralization, a commander's intent. Of it. When you train everybody to think and act like a leader, and create a culture where you ask for forgiveness instead of permission, and that scares people when you say that. I use that a lot, and I see top management and organizations, they recoil. I said, you want an organization where the engine
they've
and
got
below,
the initiative.
The middle and below have this bias for action. They have this initiative to act, to make decisions without asking for permission, because that's what you want. But to do that, so that's not chaotic. The second half of that, so the middle and below are empowered executors. They make decisions without asking for permission. But to do that effectively and not it be chaos, is that the senior leadership has to be maniacally, and I don't use that word lightly, maniacally focused on what we're wanting to do and why we're doing it.
So who's given the commander's intent?
Really the senior leadership, right? The middle managers, and even above. Sometimes the middle manager below, but whatever it is, the CEO, the VPs, the directors, those are kind of, that's your company grade to field grade officers in an organization, right? And then your non-commissioned, your NCOs and below, that's your middle management and below, the frontline folks, the customer facing folks, the sales force, all that stuff, the manufacturers, the people in the front lines. And so that's what I try to do, is to understand that there's a delineation of because the perception that the average civilian has is that the Marine Corps is this hierarchical structure of highly educated officers with all these plans, issuing orders, and then the mind-done robots below follow it. And that's the farthest thing from the truth, how the Marine Corps is. The Marine Corps is so good at decentralizations because you have to be in a combat situation, Mm-hmm. And that's what I try to do, or to present people in corporate America, that this is the way to do it. Because it produces flexibility, it produces ability to improvise, adapt, overcome, this ability to be flexible, dynamic. The rest is stagnation and mediocrity, right? And a bunch of people going, God, we say we're going to do these things, then we never do it. Well, it's because you have this hierarchical structure where everything has to go through the boss, where the boss should be maniacally focused on communicating intent. And that's when the magic starts to happen. So the Marine Corps is that's what I learned, and I tried to put into play ever since I got furloughed. And I've seen it work, and there's nothing better. And so I'm on this kind of mission to try to get organizations to understand that's how you got to, because it's only getting crazier. It's chaotic. Right. If you're kidding yourself if you think, and I see organizations, and I worked for a company, and I'll never forget. And the CEO came out, the guy I worked for, and he and I are oil and water. And he says, we're going to start whatever year it was, 2007 or 8, or he goes, we're going to make 2008 the best year ever, because we're going to just focus on planning. We're going to be the most detailed planners in the whole organization. It's all about detailed plans. And I'm like, no,
that plan works great until first contact with the enemy. Come on.
Exactly. Right.
Oh, what about the shipping problem? Oh man.
and I would see it. And dude, I would walk into a room as big as this wall, and they had they had Microsoft project gurus in there, and they would have these beautiful waterfall plans, color coded. They had a string of yarn that showed exactly where we're at.
Right.
And then inevitably something would happen that nobody was planning. And they would
Yeah.
run around for 2 weeks with their head, like chickens with their heads cut off. And we got to rebaseline, we got to rebudget, rebaseline. Oh my God, how are we going to do? Blah, 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 blah. And it was just panic, just this tense. And I was like, what? Look, what's the objective? And I would always do that. I said, what? And here we go. We get this 2-year plan. And here we are, we're 5 months into it, and you're already freaking out. I go, what's the objective? And like, what do you mean? I'm like, what is the objective? What are we trying to do? Well, we're trying to reach certification by, such and such 2011. Okay. It's 2009. Right? What can we do? How can we work the objective, the outcome, instead of working this plan? Because now this beautiful plan, this wall here is garbage to an extent. What can we do that we can still meet that objective? Is there anything we can manipulate, move up, shift, something, right? And they didn't think that way. They thought in this linear.
Yeah.
And it blew me away.
And how did it work?
It's not.
Were they salvageable or?
Some, yeah, some would get it. At least my team, I'd get them. I would never panic. I mean, and that's where the aviation skills come in, right? The ability to compartmentalize, the ability to, and that's what flying planes taught me. That combination of in the Marine Corps too, never losing your bearing, but particularly in flying airplanes, because a sortie. That's what I love about aviation. It's like it's a microcosm. It's a leadership experiment in a compressed amount of time, right? You got a beginning and an end, and you can sit there and you can evaluate how it went from. That's what I love about it, right? But all those same aspects still apply, right? And flying planes is like, you got to learn how to compartmentalize, and you got to learn how to incorporate everybody, right? It's a communications dance. Everybody thinks it's about the monkey skills. The monkey skills is the most basic given that everybody has.
Yeah.
It's that ability when the fire bell goes off or smoke in the cockpit comes out, to sit there and go, okay, this is what we're going to do. Or what do you think? And inside, I still feel nervous and, think about all those abnormal emergency procedures that we've had, and we've all had them. We've all had our share of dark, stormy nights. We've all had our things. And every time they do it, remember my hand was probably like this if no one saw it. You remember?
Right.
But then everybody says, God, Ned was so cool, or Sullenberger was so calm when he landed on the Hudson, right? But Sullenberger was petrified. He said that in an interview. He said it was the most petrified, frightening feeling he's ever had. But
that's weird. Well, and I can't speak for him, but I had an engine in a small twin. The prop shaft sheared, and it was a Navajo, which straight Navajo has counter rotating props.
Yeah.
So I've got my boss with me, who's soaking wet, like 165 pounds, Naval Academy, played football on the 155s or whatever they called it. Half tank of gas in September in Iowa. And we take off, and they got those big towers, like 2,500, 3,000 foot radio towers, America or whatever. Yeah. And you either go the east side or the west side. And the guy goes, which side do you want to go around? And I'm like, flip a quarter. I came around the west side last night. Let's go east. So we're coming around the east. We're climbing out. We hit 2,500 feet. And I pulled the power back. I pulled the props back. And all of a sudden, you remember they said a runaway prop sounds like a scalded cat?
Yeah.
It goes, all of a sudden,
just sheared off. Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. It sheared. And I can't tell which engine's running away because both RPM gauges, the right
just
one
going
got
crazy
stuck with it, and it went all the way to 3,500. So the blades are right next to you in the cockpit. I mean, you're sitting there,
right there.
Look right there. So I'm waiting for it to spin off and go into the cockpit and slice us in half, like
right.
And end up in a cornfield somewhere. And so I immediately pulled back on the yoke at the same time. Mayday, mayday, mayday. Marine 09 declare emergency. Vectors back to Des Moines. And I literally tried to unload the prop, and as I was coming up, I rolled over and did a 180 to get some altitude and to unload the prop. And when I did, then it was like All right, now I can take a second to think about it. And I reached over and I grabbed the left prop lever and put it to feather. Nothing happened. I pulled the right one back and I went wow, wow over the screech of the runaway next to me. So
So
I
you knew
realized,
that,
okay, I got the
yeah.
right. Yeah, the right's good. The left is bad. Well, you remember, I didn't have enough experience in civilian airplanes to know, like, we're used to every airplane we've flown, T-34, King Air, C-130, it'll mechanically and electrically feather.
Right.
And so my thought was, I need to get this thing to feather, and I friggin' chopped it and went to feather, and no, man,
Oh, it just kept going?
it was just flat
Goes flat
because
like a board.
yeah, the shaft sheared, so it's flat. So the guy goes, and it's really weird sinking feeling. I'm sure Sully felt it when the guy goes, "Can you make it? It's 10 miles back to Des Moines International." And it was a real weird feeling to realize you're about to crash an airplane. And I'm looking around at nothing but fields. And I go, "No, Marine 09, we're going to put it into a field somewhere unless you happen to have an airport handy." And the guy goes, "Oh yeah, you got Ankeny, Iowa right off your left side."
There
And I
you go.
look and I see this tiny little airstrip and you're micro focused. And I go,
Yeah.
"Oh my God, that's too small." And he goes, "Oh, it's 5,000 feet long. Are you looking at the remote control field that they fly little RC airplanes? It's about 2 miles off the left side." And I go, "Oh, got it." And I rolled into left base and I'd already told my boss, I said, "Hey, when we go in, this is before he pointed out the field. I said, "Hey, right before we crash, I need you to pop that door for me and make sure the door's open. You hold it open, so when we crash, I need it open." And he was like, he didn't question me. He just okay. And so when we landed, single engine, he turns and this is the first time he's really said anything. He turns to me and he goes, Taco, that was the smoothest landing I've ever had. And you had 2 engines last night. You banged it on." I'm
Yeah,
like, "Well,
right.
intense concentration
Get
happens
hyper
to give you
focused, yeah.
a little bit." And then he goes, "Hey, by the way, why did you want the door open before we landed?" I said, "That's because if we crash in a field, the fuselage twist. I want to make sure the door doesn't get jammed and we can get out." And he goes, "Oh, good idea."
Yeah.
Well, I had a great fitness report. That we talk about leadership. I was blessed with he's now retired Colonel Pat Ribman. He was major at the time. Major John Whistler, who retired 3-star. I had some fantastic leaders in my
Yeah.
life, and they weren't in the aviation community. They were in other communities. Colonel Brian Palmer over in Afghanistan, Colonel Bob Clay in Iraq. I had guys that would sit and focus with me and work with me.
Yeah.
The biggest thing, like if I have a guy I'm mentoring, I give him 2 things. I give him a digital copy of How to Win Friends and Influence People, and I give him William Onaker, um, Who's Got the Monkey. You remember that?
Oh, yeah,
Time
yeah.
management.
Yeah,
It,
I've given that, "Who's got your monkey" thing to a handful of people throughout the years. Yeah.
yeah, I'm telling you that Who's Got the Monkey as the S3 Alpha for Colonel, Major Whistler at the time, as the S3 Alpha, his captain. I was getting beaten by the 2 squadrons, and they were calling up, and I'm a alpha type. I'm trying to help, and I'm trying to, do this. And oh, hey, do you know this guy? Yeah, I went to TBS with that guy. Let me give him a call. That type thing. And Whistler calls me in his office. He goes, "Hey, come here," and I'm like, "Yes, sir." And he said, and he pulls out, and I wish I had pulled it out for the show. He gives me this tattered um, copy of Who's Got the Monkey, Xerox to old government, with the old
Yeah,
stamp
right.
to
Yeah,
tell
yeah.
you what Xerox copy your classified
Yeah, right.
documents came from.
Yeah.
So he gave me this thing. He says, "Go make a copy of it. Take the staple out, make a copy of it, give me mine back. And then I want you to sit and I want you to read it. Then come back in here and report to me." Like, "Roger that, sir." So I do it. I sit and it took 5 minutes to read this thing. And the light bulbs went off. Oh my God. A person's problem is a monkey. And
Mhm.
it's now jumped from their shoulders to yours, and you're feeding this little squawking monkey, and now you're no longer the leader. You're no longer the manager because those guys are knocking on your door going, "Hey, sir, did you have a chance to check with so and so?" "Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Damn
Yep.
it. I'm sorry, man. That was on my list of things to do." So after that, my life changed. they called me up and from MWSS, whoever up in Okinawa or mainland Japan, and 273 or whatever it was. Hey, sir, or 172. Hey, Taco, blah, 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 blah. I said, oh, that's great. I tell you what, today is Tuesday. I'll mark you down for Thursday at 1500. And what I want you to do is bring me 3 solutions to your problem, and
Yeah.
I'll pick which course of action we go with. And it
Yeah.
stymied the guy. The first time he was like, and I go, okay, great. I got another call coming in. I'll talk to you later. Click. And I hung up.
Yep.
And then after that, man, I felt like Wonder Woman with my bracelets. And I'm deflecting stuff left and right, but I'm grabbing all of these COAs. And it was me deciding as a leader which COA I felt was the best to go. And
Yeah.
he changed my
It's
life. He really did.
it's such a common, and I'm guilty of that too. I'm guilty of taking on monkeys, and I think it's something that junior leaders, everybody has to go through. But once you understand that concept, it is extremely powerful and empowering. I had a great Colonel Bob Bader told me this. He was the first one. I didn't understand at the time. When I started working in corporate America, it really started making sense, tied into this monkey thing. He said, look, your job as a leader is to make yourself useless so you can become more useful to the organization. And I was like, useless? That doesn't,
I
because
like
useless
that.
is such a negative. And I was like, but I've started using that, particularly in corporate America. And when you're in your first leadership role, or you get some real responsibility, and it's exciting, particularly if you're hungry for leadership and you want it. And I wanted that responsibility, but it feels good initially when people come to you and bring you monkeys to put on your back, right? Because it feels like you're justifying your job. But in short order, you find that eventually those monkeys start ripping up your, clawing at your eyes and ripping at your ear and biting your ears
Yeah, they
and
got to be fed. They got to be
pissing and
fed, take care of.
shitting on your desk and your desk, and it's like, okay, I got to get rid of some of these monkeys. You're right. And taking that initiative, like you did in that scenario, is like, okay. And I worked for a great entrepreneur in this event that got that concept. And he told me that too. He doesn't use the term monkeys, but he said things changed for him. And this is the guy that started Residence Inn, and he sold it to Marriott. And so, I mean, this guy was a prominent entrepreneur here in town. And he told me that one at lunch one time. He said things changed for him the moment he stopped. Like people always, particularly as he got up higher in the organization, they wanted more and more of his time and his
Right.
attention. And he felt like he had to give it to him. And so when people would come by him and say, hey, Jack, you got this, I got this. Can you look at this? I got this and that. And he did what he would, and before he'd go, okay, yeah, I'll look at it. And he'd be reading it at night instead of talking to his kids,
Right.
and until he started doing what you did, he'd be like, I tell you what, just tell me what the proposal is and tell me what the action is and how I can help. If otherwise, and Bader was like that as a CEO in the 352 community, at the 130 community. I remember I was a brand new aircraft commander and broke in Hawaii. And everybody back home is like, oh yeah, sure, you should a generator in Hawaii. Sure, Ned did. Perfect. Right?
Yeah.
What a convenient time for Ned to lose a generator. But I no kidding, had lost a generator.
Oh, come on.
And
Didn't you have a good engineer just cap that son of a gun and off you go?
well, I think we had to buy one from Hickam from the whatever squadron there was at Hickam or something. So
Right.
it wasn't that big of a deal. But I remember I called back, and this is my first overwater trip as an aircraft commander. I'd done a handful. They kind of keep you CONUS for a while,
Yeah.
And this is my first overwater 2 or 3 months after I've been an aircraft commander. And I remember I called back because our previous CEO you had to do that. You had to run everything past him, even buying a generator. And I remember I called Bob Bader and I said, hey, Skipper, I'm stuck in Hawaii without a generator, and I just want your permission to buy a generator and put it on. He was like,
Right.
he goes, hey, didn't I sign your aircraft commander papers? Like, was it 3 months ago I signed it? I go, yes, sir. He goes, well, why don't you start acting like one and stop bothering me? Stop bothering me over a stupid generator.
Oh,
Yes,
nice.
sir. But it was so liberating. He ran the squadron that way. It was so liberating when we did that, right? I mean, so
Yeah.
people just started,
Acting like
acting.
leaders,
Yeah,
taking the chance. Yeah. I mean, if something happens, you're going to get railed on later on. And that's happened many times. I've gotten wire brushed by some senior guy because I went ahead and did something because I didn't have time to talk to him or whatever. But I felt I did the right thing in the situation at the time.
Yeah.
What books or advice? I mean, book maybe pamphlets like that. Who's got the monkey? What's your
Yeah.
favorite
Great question.
top two favorite?
Yeah, by top of the list by far, and this has been a book that just has totally changed my life, post Marine Corps, and certainly has helped me both personally, professionally as an entrepreneur, in so many aspects. And it's Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art. Now, that is not Sun Tzu's The Art of War. This is Stephen Pressfield, The War of Art. And I've had Stephen Pressfield on my show. Stephen Pressfield is a Marine, and he's
I didn't
written a
know that.
lot. Yeah, he's written a lot of historical fiction around the warrior culture. You know,
I read the Afghan one. What was the Afghan one?
uh,
Where they went through Afghanistan and the view from the soldier, and then
yeah, I
the
forget his name.
300. Uh,
Yeah,
he did
the
the
field
300.
fields of fire. Was it Gates of Fire for the
Gates
for
of Fire. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the Gates of Fire is a great one. In fact, the Marine Corps, if you walk through the infantry IOC school at TBS, infantry officer course, after
Mhm.
you graduate TBS, they have a lot of quotes from Gates of Fire from Stephen Pressfield because it's a great leadership example. Like Pressfield totally gets the leadership culture, the warrior culture that the Marine Corps subscribes to, all small unit leadership units subscribe to.
Right.
But he also wrote The Legend of Bagger Vance. That's where he made his
I didn't know that.
that's when things changed for him. Now, The War of Art is an easy read. It's a very small book. And when I coach individuals, I have them and I agree to do a coaching assignment with them. I don't do a lot of one-on-one coaching anymore, but when I do, and when I have them read this book before we start.
Mhm.
And you can read it in 2 nights or even 1 night, to be quite honest. And it deals with Pressfield wrote this as initially as he thought for writers because he's a writer. And he went through his whole adult life up into his 40s, knowing that he wanted to be a writer, but felt like he could never be a writer because what this universal force that he calls resistance has tried to stop him, and it really played games with him. And so, his whole idea of his book is you're going to go through life, and the angels, the muse, God, whatever you want to believe, put something on your heart and your soul that you know
Mhm.
that you're called to do. And we all know what that is. And if you really listen to it, you know what it is because it really stirs your soul. It gets your stomach in knots, and you're like, and you think there's no way I could do this. And then you talk yourself out of it. And so that talking yourself out of it is resistance. It's a real force that's going to try to stop you. And so it only works if you're going from a lower plane to a higher plane. So for example, if you're, a cashier at the local convenience store, nothing against cashiers at convenience store, but your ultimate goal is to go work with Bill Gates in sub-Saharan Africa and figure out how to create, waterless toilets.
Right.
That is a bigger goal than being a cashier at the local Quickie Mart, right? And
Right.
so that goal from here to here seems impossible. And so the wider that gap, the more resistance is going to try to stop you. And the point of it is that you need to do the work anyway. And when you do the work anyway, resistance, the universe has to move. And the more
I
that
like
you
that.
the more that you lean into what the angels, the muse, God has put on your heart and soul, and the more that you listen to that and obey that, the universe has to move. And I love that concept. And I've seen it work in action, I think. And you talk to a lot of people who've accomplished things that both you and I have considered significant.
Yeah.
They will all subscribe to that. And there's even he even quotes a great book. And I should have think his name, but there was a great explorer, mountaineer, that in the early 30s that his goal, he was going to climb every summit that there was.
Mhm.
And he was well on his way. Then World War II broke out, and then he was I can't remember what country he's from, but anyway, he ended up in a German POW camp in 1939. So right at the start of World War II, and he spent the whole time in a German POW camp until the end of the war. And when he got out, his body was pretty damaged and brutalized from 6 years
Starvation
of,
and stuff.
of
Yeah.
malnutrition and hard labor and stuff. And people told him, hey, it's all right. Your mountaineering days are over. And he said to himself, no, it's not. Internally, he was saying, no, it's not.
Yeah. It's all here.
And resistance even comes in the form of the ones closest to you. It can be your spouse, it can be your best friend, it can be your kids that are saying, "What are you doing? Maybe you shouldn't pursue this crazy thing," and you're like, "Yeah, maybe I shouldn't," So it can come in all kinds of forms, this resistance. And so, uh, but the point, like this mountaineer, is he started setting forth, said, "You know what? I'm going to go climb," and I can't remember what it was, Kilimanjaro or something, and he did, and he writes in his book, this mountaineer, that he says, when you pursue those things that that you're supposed to be doing, that the calling is there, the nudging, all of a sudden you get this phone call from somebody, you get this chance meeting with somebody, all of a sudden this person that, wants to fund your project and gives you $10,000. All these things start to happen because you faced resistance. You decided to slay the dragon. And I think what I love about the War of Art with Pressfield is that the amateur out there, and there's tons of amateurs, and it's a constant battle for me to try to be to get out of this amateur status and be a professional. But the amateur goes through life trying to plan things, try to make things so that they can live in a dragon-free world. And they're surprised when a dragon rears its ugly head, kind of like that guy I told you that wanted to be perfect planners, and then they freak out when something happens.
Mm-hmm.
The professional knows that there's always going to be dragons. And so the limited time, energy, and resources that we have isn't spent on trying to lay the groundwork and build the framework for a dragon-free world, because it's impossible. So instead, we spend this limited time, energy, and resources on becoming dragon slayers.
I like that.
And so instead, we build up our shield. We get the best sword possible.
Right.
We learn how to fight effectively. And then we go through life hoping that we don't run into the dragon, but one comes, we go ahead and we start slaying it. And then to take it even a step further, it's understanding what outcome it is when what are we trying to accomplish here? What am I trying to do? And taking that time to pause, just like when we're faced with an abnormal procedure in the cockpit, like the first thing to do is to punch the clock instead of grabbing fire handles and feathering props, because it gives us that time to think, what am I trying to do here? And that's what leaders do. And they sit there and like, oh, okay, my goal is to get that pot of gold, not that one. So yeah, I see that dragon over there. Fine. That's the dragon I should be slaying. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what the War of Art is about. He doesn't use those terms exactly, but that's kind of my summation of it. And it's just a fascinating book. I love that book, and I refer to it often, and I always turn people onto it. And it's a game changer if you're interested in living a significant life. That's how I view it. And then the second book, I would say, and it's a classic. There's so many good ones. God dang, there's so many good ones. But for me, it was Jim Collins' Good to Great. It's an old book. It came out in 2001.
Say that name again.
Jim Collins' Good to Great. It's kind of a classic in the business sense. But the whole book, he's a statistician. He's a data dink guy, so it's kind of dry. But there's one chapter in there that encapsulates everything that we talk about here. It's the chapter on level 5 leadership. And it really does talk about decentralization. You hear a lot of people talking about in the corporate world, like, is this the right person to have on the bus? And if he is the right person on the bus, make sure he's in the right seat. All that comes from Jim Collins in the level 5 leadership chapter of that book. And so if anybody's interested in at least dipping their toe into the decentralization mindset, and they don't want to go to the Marine Corps first, go to Jim Collins' level 5 leadership. It basically encapsulates the Marine Corps mindset in that chapter. And then I suggest you can go. There's also some great books out there on leadership. The one I'm really late, and I just got ahead of my show, Mike Etor, who I was telling you about earlier, who you need to have on this show. He's a career Marine, became a C-level executive in a billion-dollar company. And I just had him on my show. In fact, I just released the episode last Monday, or just the other day. Yesterday.
That segue is great. So yeah, talk about your show. And all right, so tell me about him. Yeah.
So Mike Etor. So my show is Dose of Leadership. It's a podcast that I celebrated. It's the 9th anniversary is on the 22nd of this month. So January 22nd, it'll be 9 years old.
And how many episodes have you done?
I've released, what am I at? 515, somewhere in that
Whoa!
realm. And I've done more. There's just some I haven't released. Some I've recorded and I didn't release. But the whole idea was when I started the show 9 years ago, it was December of 2012. And I remember I started my official LLC business in 2007.
Mhm.
And then 2007 to 11, it was just always building websites, trying to get noticed. And I thought, well, how can I get more noticed in a noisy world? And I said, well, what if I just started talking? And I read books all the time. So I thought, what if I just started having conversations with these people writing books? And that was mid-December of 2012. And I sent about 75 emails out that day. And like 3 people agreed to come on my show. I made up the name of the show, typing the email. I made up the release date of the show, typing the email. So I didn't do this like marketing research. And I was literally, I swear to God, typing the email like, hey, I'm a big fan of you. I'm launching a show called, and I was like, what do I call it? Dose of Leadership.
No way.
I swear to God.
That's how it started.
I launched it. I'm launching it on, and I looked at the calendar. I said 4 weeks from the following Monday, January 22nd. I'd love you to be on the show. Yeah. And it was a 4-line email, and it was about that long. It wasn't big. And at the end of the day, I had Gene Kranz, the flight director from NASA, said yes. And Jim Kuzes, and Alan Canfield, the Getting Things Done guy. I can't remember his last name right now off the top of my head. But anyway, I was like, holy crap, I can't let these guys down. So
that was only 500 shows ago. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. And then I reached out to a couple people who had shows, and they gave me like an hour and a half of their time, and bought equipment like on the 26th. I ordered the equipment on the 26th of December. I got it on January 3rd. I hooked it up, did my first interview on January 6th. And then I launched the show like I said I would on January 22nd with 6 interviews, and I've never looked back. So
that's awesome.
It's my favorite thing to do. I love it. I'm glad to see that you're doing it. I know I love to see the growth of what you do. I mean, you know the power of it. It's just fun, and
it's a blast. I look forward to this every Tuesday night to sit there and shoot the bull with friends and people that I've met that I find interesting, or authors, or more military flavored for me. But I remember flying with you and talking to you about, hey, how did you get into this? And then I had interviewed those guys, and I remember calling you going, hey, I tried this Facebook Live. It failed miserably with the great guy, Scott Gibson. What can I do? And you're like, get StreamYard. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, get a headset. Okay. Whatever you say, Rich.
Well, that's kind of what I did when I called those guys. I mean, and they were like, and it was Andrew Warner, who's got a great show, still does, Mixergy, and he interviews entrepreneurs, basically Silicon Valley guys, but he's a very good interviewer. I learned a lot about how to interview from him.
What was his name again?
His name's Andrew Warner. Mixergy is his show. He's very successful. He just released a book about how to interview and do conversation. I think he is the best, in my opinion. He is the best interviewer out there in the podcast space.
What about Joe Rogan? I love Joe Rogan.
I love Joe Rogan. I love his show. But even I was watching him today, and he had Oliver Stone. And I love Joe. He's a comedian, though, and he's good. Sometimes Joe, I mean, I know he had Oliver Stone, which, by the way, Oliver Stone said, yes, he's going to come on my show. We're talking about his JFK documentary. Yeah. So I'm looking for dates on that. But anyway, because I knew Oliver Stone was coming on, I saw that Joe Rogan interviewed him. So I thought, well, I'll listen to this interview for homework. Right.
Right.
And it became apparent. And again, I love Joe. I love Joe's show. It's one of the few podcasts I actually listen to. And Oliver Stone was talking. There were like 6 instances. It was clear that Joe had not watched the documentary. And it was painfully clear to me. It might not for the average listener, but for me, it was like, I could tell that Oliver Stone was like, well.
Which one? For JFK?
Yeah, it's got a brand new one that came out. I was watching it tonight. It's fascinating. It's JFK revisited. Because if you watch the original JFK movie,
Mhm.
I'm a big Oliver Stone fan. I don't agree with everything that he's done, but I think you need guys like him that kind of stir the pot and ask intelligent questions.
Yeah, I
I,
like him.
I, I
He's good.
yeah, you know, Platoon was a game changer for me. Watching that, it's just and it's such an impactful movie for me when it came
Yeah,
out, and I just thought it was brilliant. I think he's brilliant. Again, politically, I don't agree with him on everything, but that's okay, right? I appreciate him as an artist and what he's trying to do. But at the end of JFK that came out in 92 or 91, whatever year that was, that movie came out,
yeah,
there was I didn't know this, but I remember that at the end, it talks about how there's all these documents that are sealed and they're not going to be released until 2029.
right. Yes,
And then in the early 90s, and Oliver Stone pushed this, they pushed that up and that stuff got released so it's like there's like 2 million documents that you and I could go to the National Archives and look that stuff up. And people have been doing that for years. And so he created this documentary on Showtime that just came out this week, and it's fascinating. You don't want to say that you watched it because you don't want to be, but it's done so well.
I listened to him when I drove up South Dakota to go buy that Jeep, and he was doing an interview with somebody. It was just one of those that came across on the YouTube feed,
Yeah,
and it's just kind of constantly playing stuff. And I'm driving the truck, and I've got headset on. I'm just listening to all sorts of stuff. But I listened to that interview with him, and it's amazing the stuff that he couldn't put in there. And he alluded to the fact that they're probably still watching him, monitoring his phone calls, and
right, right.
and when you listen to him, you're like, yeah, friggin' Oswald didn't do it.
Yeah, you watch this documentary, you'll be like, "Whoa!"
Yeah,
And
there's
there's a
so
lot of
much
stuff
that
that
people don't
there's
talk about.
stuff there's stuff that we didn't even know in the '90s that we know now, and there's been a couple. It's fascinating, just average citizens that have kind of dedicated certain things and they've pieced it all together, and you're like,
Yeah,
"Wait a second
and the
here."
Warren Commission didn't have this, or they didn't
Yeah.
release this, or why was this guy not
Mhm.
interviewed, and, oh, why how did you overlook the fact that Oswald was here and who
Yeah,
he
there's a
was
lot.
hanging with? Yeah, there's
Yeah,
a lot of
it's
stuff that he could be a conspiracy theorist all he wants, and you know what? Truth is stranger than fiction, and I goddamn guarantee you that there's some stuff, shady stuff going on, and then at the end, I think they released a bunch, but then they made the rest of it secret, and it's gonna be released, and kinda like
yeah, there's
Pfizer
yeah, there's a
Moderna's,
yeah, there's a
results on their
that's
DNA,
right.
RNA
That's
for
right.
50 years, we'll all be
Right.
dead.
Yeah.
Can't sue them.
Yeah, there's a couple, but it's pretty fascinating in how he put. I mean, it's a very good job. It's not Alex Jones, uh, you know tinfoil hat stuff. It's like professional journalism going. I don't know. I'm lining this up, and this is what this says, and a
Yeah,
common sense says, okay, there's some questions here, and
yeah.
I think that's
That's
great. I love that kind of stuff because we need more of that, and
yeah. That'll be
because
an interview I would look forward to listening to.
yeah, I'm really looking forward to talking to him. I just his guy said, "Yeah, let's do it," and I gave him some dates. So I'm just waiting to hear back from the dates. But that's what. So the show originally, it's. I'm gonna change the name of it. It's called Dose of Leadership, but I'm
I like your
changing the name of.
microdose.
Yeah, I'm just gonna call it the Dose because
That's cool.
I have trouble because I'm just curious. Like I want to talk to a guy like Oliver Stone, and what does Oliver Stone have to do about? There's a ton of podcasts out there talking about team building empowerment, which I'm all for. And I think that's what the original kind of concept of the show was. And I can talk about it all day, but to be quite honest, for 5 years and 500 plus episodes, I can only talk about team building and empowerment so many times where I'm about
Sure.
to put a bullet in my head, because there's nothing, there's
Yeah,
nothing
yeah,
new under the sun about it. I mean, there's nobody that's going to write because all these concepts of leadership, they just exist. Nobody invented it. The Marine Corps didn't invent it. I mean, they're just laws of the universe, that if you show up to the field without your sleeping bag and I'm your boss, I give you my sleeping bag. That's not a patented idea. That's like biblical almost,
yeah,
right? I mean, does that make sense what I'm saying?
yeah.
Like, so are you're gonna write me a book that revolutionized that? I don't know. And so I'm just
Well,
more
everybody
interested.
has.
Yeah, there's a gazillion books out there, and to be quite honest, You could even go to the Bible, and I'm not a big, religious guy, Christian guy. I mean, I'm spiritual. I believe in God, but I don't, you know, but you can read First Corinthians where, love is patient, love is kind, you know,
Yeah.
love is slow to anger, records no wrongs, I mean, you read that. I mean, that's leader. I mean, you can replace the word love with leadership, and that's the type of leader that I want to be, right? I want to be
Yeah.
patient. I want to be kind. I want to be slow to anger. I want to be, record no wrongs. I want to persevere. So is it
But
really
what?
that hard to understand it? But it's
So
hard.
so you
It's hard to
specialize in
do.
that, but the dose, I love it because you kind of go out and you can explore in left field or right field or center
Right.
field and pull all those things in and then kind of get back to you can center line back later. But I've
Yeah.
had
So,
some people on that are not military at all,
mhm.
but they interest me.
Yeah. And what I'm interested in, Taco, is that I think that like the obligation that we have is that with the short time that we're here
Yeah.
is to make the place better than we found it, right? I mean, that's the whole reason for living. I,
Hmm.
I and I that's something I got to get up every day and remind myself and get out of my selfish head because I'm a selfish pig just like you and just like the other guy, right? But it takes work for this wretch myself to kind of take my I hate people t-shirt on because I sometimes tend to wake up with my I hate people t-shirt and it's work for me to take it off. I'll be the first to admit it, right? I do want to love people, but you know what I mean? And I go to
That's
work
like
and I walk through the airport as I'm trying to get to my thing. And I'm like, I want to strangle half the people walking through the airport as they're getting in my way.
hey, no, that's me taxiing over the bridge, Alpha
Yeah.
Bridge, and you can't get a word in edgewise to Delta ramp,
Oh yeah.
and you're getting so frustrated, and everyone's stepping over everyone if they just take a second
Yeah.
to even find out if we had a gate, which we didn't, so we had to hold. But I want to get back. Who you've interviewed 500 people, and I've listened to like Matthew McConaughey, and I love your stuff. Who was your favorite interview? Do you have top 3? Say top 3 interviews
Man, it's
that you
such a
really
tough
enjoyed it and you got
question.
done, you told your wife, "Man, this today was the greatest day. This really made my day."
That's an unfair question because it's almost like asking which one's your favorite kid, and I know that's a cop out to say. I will try to attempt to answer this question, but it's like me saying, "Okay, who with all your kids, Taco, which one's your favorite? Come on,
All right,
level
well,
with
all right,
me.
all
Which
right.
one's
When
your favorite?"
somebody asks me,
Yeah.
"What's your favorite place to fly to?" And I got to say, "All right, let's qualify that. Most romantic place, most
Yeah.
exciting place, most scenic place." I mean, I can tell you Hong Kong's my favorite city in the world. I could
Yeah.
tell you Santiago, Chile is the most gorgeous city in the world with the snow-capped Andes. I could tell you Cocos Island's most romantic place or Saginaw, Michigan, Mackinac Island. So, what
I
who
yeah,
did
I
you
gotta tell you,
enjoy flying or talking to?
there's so many that I've enjoyed, and again, because I enjoy this aspect. I really do love talking to people, and sometimes, but it's the ones that have um Sh that I actually went into it, be quite honest, I'm like, "God, who is this what am I gonna be talk to them about?" And it does I don't know nobody don't know them. There's some CEO of some organization I've ever heard of,
Mhm.
and I end up and I go into it almost with kind of a negative attitude, and I walk away, it's like, that was the most impactful conversation that I've had in a long time, and one of them was Elka Dillon. Her name is Elka Dillon, Alkha, and I can't remember the name of her organization, but she's a CEO. And, I'll look it up here as we're looking, and she's just amazing. God, what was the name of her company? But I just had this and this conversation was probably 5 or 6 years ago, and we just talked about, service and taking care of our folks, and she just got it. It was just one of those people that I talked to on a leadership level that just totally got it, and it was
Mhm.
just refreshing. Um, and we just even clicked. She even said at the end, she goes, "Man, that was a very powerful conversation." But I've had so many that ended up just being so great. But I think from a coolness factor, it was cool to talk to Matthew McConaughey. So that was a
All
favorite
right,
that
all
that
right,
that I
all
got to talk to
right.
him, and he was such an affable guy. It wasn't
Yeah.
the best from a quality standpoint, it wasn't like what does an average listener get out of it.
Yeah.
I felt kind of bad about that I could have done better, but that was nerve wracking for me in a sense. I wanted it to go well, and because it was stupid that why should I be nervous about it? But I was, and I got to tell you, Dana Perino's been on 3 times. I love talking with her every time she
Uh-huh.
comes on. That's always a treat, and she's become a great. I wouldn't say we're friends, but she'll answer every email that I send her. She's helped me out. She got me Oliver North on the show. She's
Oh, yeah,
given
you
me
had Ollie North, yeah.
she's given me great advice behind the scenes.
Uh-huh.
She's just a solid individual, and she's fun to talk to. I tell you, Jamie Kern Lima, that's one that sticks out as a favorite. She's the founder of It Cosmetics, and her story of perseverance and how, you talk about someone that in the tenacity and perseverance and just keeps grinding and just has turned herself into this force for good. And so it has entrepreneurship, it has service, it has leadership, it has everything. She's just an amazing. That was a very fun conversation. Jamie Kern Lima stands out to me. Gene Kranz, early on, he was
Wow.
one of my first. That was very special to me. That probably
Yeah.
stands out as one that's very special because he was such a hero to me, and I was such a NASA geek as I was a little kid growing up.
You see the prop behind me?
Yeah.
I'll take a picture of that later. I went to an astronaut dinner, and I took that prop. It was off a Marine UAV in Iraq, and I went up to all the Apollo guys, Gene Sisson, Fred Hayes, Jim Lovell. I'm like, "Sir, I'd be honored if you'd autograph my prop." And they all did. They were great, and I
That's
got grants.
awesome.
Yeah, so that's kind of a cool deal.
Yeah, it's been a disappointment of mine that I haven't been able to get astronauts on the show. I tried to get Cernan on before
He
he
died.
passed,
Yeah.
and then someone else was alive, and I was trying to get. Oh, I tried to get Collins on before he died, and it just didn't happen. I wanted it, and so all those guys are disappearing, and I wanted to talk to them. I was glad I got to talk to Krantz, though. He's a hoot.
Oh, God, what was this guy's? I had a buddy named Reb Stimson. I've got a buddy named Reb Stimson. He had a, I say had, he had a Stearman, and he sold it to, oh God, he lives out there in Orca Island in Seattle. It'll come to me later. Astronaut, and he was on Apollo 10 or 11. Anyway, he calls me up. And Reb goes, "Hey, you got to come over to the hangar. I got this astronaut buying my Stearman. You got to come meet him." So I go over there and meet him, and he's to me relatively young looking. And this is in 98, 99. And I go, "Hey, how you doing, Mitch Bell?" They called me Taco. Nice to meet you. And he goes, "Hey, Taco, what's going on?" And I go, "So what shuttle mission were you commander of?" And he goes,
Oh
he
shit!
got he got pissed. Shuttle,
Wow!
I'm Apollo. And I kind of giggle and
Wow!
I go, "Oh, so sorry, sir. Wait a minute. I do recall I was in first grade. I remember watching you land on the moon. Yes, sir. Yeah, sorry about that." Oh, he got pissed.
Oh
And then and
man!
then and then my buddy Reb tells him, "Hey, listen, the right brake's kind of sticky. You got to watch it." I know how to fly Stearmans. And oh man, he came back in and nearly ground looped it. It went off the
Wow!
runway and it was bad. But um, we need to get some astronauts. We had an astronaut that was in the class or two behind me, and when he goes in, they go, "So what did you fly?" Mitch Bell. "Oh, C-130s. What'd you fly? F-18s. What'd you fly?" "I was Learjet captain." "What'd you fly?" And he goes, "I was a glider pilot." And they go,
Flew
"What?"
shuttle.
Yeah, he was a space shuttle guy, and I can't remember his name, but after it might have been right before 9/11 that NASA actually called him back to do a bunch of stuff. But it's funny. We're talking about people on the show, and right here I've got Kevin Sullivan. Um, Kevin Sullivan's got a great show, 21 Gun Salute, and I've got to get him on the show. I've been on his show a couple times. Freddie Joe Farnsworth. He is one of my heroes. He's a Marine that got hired by Dale Dye to work Starship Troopers, and
Oh,
then
really? That's
from
cool.
there, yeah, I interviewed him, and from there, he's gone on to Band of Brothers. He's the devil,
Oh,
that
yeah,
would terrorize the actors in Band of Brothers,
yeah.
Pacific, and all those
Nice. That
Saving
would've been a
Private
fun job.
Ryan. Oh,
Yeah.
he loves it, man. He eats that up. As a matter of fact, um, Let's see this. See if I do. So you see that? That's his uniform from the Pacific right there.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
gave it to me when I was out in San Diego.
that's cool.
He
That's real
gave it
cool.
to me when I was out in San Diego. And then this guy, I love Desi Rosado. Desi owns a hotel down in Belize in Caye Caulker. I say that right, Desi? Caye Caulker, Caye Caulker. Um, I Christmas of 2004. I'm standing at the gate. Some woman's panicking, and I'm trying to calm her down because her daughter and fiance and 8 couples are going to be delayed coming in from Chicago. And I'm like, "Ma'am, it's Christmas Eve. I promise you." Maybe it's 2007. I promise you, we will we will wait for your family. I promise you.
Yeah.
And then Desi walks up to me and he's like, Mitch Taco Bell, what's up? And little did I know, Desi went to flight school, but I had not seen him since Corpus. He ended up dropping from flight school, going to comm and becoming a commo, and then going to work for Qualcomm. And holy crap, man, Desi is most successful. He gives me his business. Well, actually, I think what I said was, hey, Desi, he had a tank top and cut off shorts. I'm like, hey, man, if you got some nice clothes in your suitcase, I could possibly get you upgraded first class. He's like, and he pulls out his 4B, and I'm like, "Oh, look at you, fancy pants!" And then he gives
Already
me his
first
card.
class.
He's executive vice president of
Platinum.
technology for Qualcomm. You
Oh,
know,
geez.
so I love seeing Marines in successful positions. As a matter of fact, that's a guy you need on your show
Yeah, man.
to talk about the technical aspect of things. And he lives in Dallas. Great guy. Yes, Desi, you are a stud. So I've sit there. My dad always says, "Hey, you just need to stick to an hour." What I need to do is start doing like Rogan and breaking out little 10-minute segments of the show. But I've had
Yeah.
you on for an hour and 22, and it feels like 15.
I know, man. It's so much
Is there
fun.
any other exciting guests? How far out do you line up your guys, your guests?
Oh, I mean, there for a while, in a perfect world when it's really firing all cylinders, I would have maybe about 5, 6 weeks of buffer,
Yeah,
but I don't like to have too, I don't, it's frustrating because sometimes, like even now, like I'll release an episode, like the episode I release every Monday, I recorded it 3 or 4 weeks ago. And
yeah,
sometimes to me, it's not as fresh. I wish I could do more episodes. Um, and I've done it. When I first launched the show, I was releasing 3 episodes a week, and I was busting my butt getting that done. It was a lot of work, but it paid off because I built up some momentum in the beginning. Now I release 1 episode every Monday on consistently an episode, and then I try to do I vacillate because I'm so busy with working for American, and I got a client here in town
mhm,
that I'm helping with their leadership culture, and so that takes up a lot of time. And I'm getting ready to renew them for another 6 months, and so and then there's another podcast that I'm helping a guy here in town that I co-host with, and it's almost like I'm doing too much. But my to answer your question is I from a discipline standpoint, I every day I try to send out 10 requests of new people to come on my show,
wow,
and I follow up on 10 that I sent out if I haven't heard from them. And then I also in that so it's I go 10 new, 10 follow up if I haven't heard, and then respond to however many of the people that have come to. And that includes people who reach out to me because I get a lot of stuff from PR agencies. I mean, I get probably 30 emails a day plus about people wanting to come on the show.
yeah,
And so I got to try to filter through those too.
wow.
And I really need a team. I mean, and there's a local entrepreneur here that wants to invest in Dose and give me that back end. And so I'm kind of contemplating that to see if I can take it to the next level. And I really am trying to rebrand it to the Dose so I can get, for example, like I'm trying to get Gene Simmons on the show from Kiss. So how does that fit with Dose of Leadership, right? And so
Well,
that's
he's
been
a
my
businessman. He
no,
is
exactly,
a
right?
businessman.
I want to talk to him about that. I want to talk to him about mindset, entrepreneurship. I don't necessarily want to talk to him about how many girls he's bedded or even the Kiss show. I want to talk about his mindset
How he
and
grew that.
how he grew
Kinda
it.
like Queen,
Right.
Freddie Mercury
Mhm.
would be an incredible, intelligent guy to speak to about how he had the vision for Queen back then and
Right.
developed it. But what about Rich Dad Poor Dad? Have you ever had him on, Robert?
Yeah, I've reached out to him a couple times. It's kind of been dead, and never. And yeah,
I've sent a couple emails. I've never heard back.
yeah, I've never heard back from him, and I've
I
reached
don't
out a
want to talk
couple.
business with him either. I just want to talk about him being a Marine.
Yeah, I mean that was kind of my approach to it too, right? Was to talk to
Yeah.
him about his how the Marine kind of let did the Marine Corps help him go down the path that he is, and how does it help him? That was my original reach out to him. It's been a year or two since I've reached out to him. He might be worth getting on, but
You know, on LinkedIn, I'd see Pete Koch, and he was Swede, the Swede in Heartbreak Ridge, which I
oh yeah,
always loved. And
yeah.
I reached out to him, and I had him on the show.
I remember you because I
I
was
love
staying at
that.
your house that you were telling me you were gonna. I think that weekend I stayed at your house. The next week you were gonna have Sweet on. I think,
Yeah, yeah,
or
yeah. I had the Swede. Man, I
yeah,
love it. You know, some of the people you get to meet, Dale Dye. You know, I've worked
yeah.
with him through
I had
charity
Dale
stuff.
Dye. Yeah, Dale
I
Dye was
love
on
him.
early on my show. You know, I loved Dale because it was fun. Like when like I had Dale on. Like we, what always stuck out to me was that scene in Platoon where it's near the end of the movie when right before the kind of culmination scene of the big, firefight at the end.
Mhm,
It's the night before, and Elias and Barnes have already gone through the scene at the village, and Barnes has schwacked that village lady, and
mhm,
Barnes and him got in a fist fight, and then they're down there at the camp, and Dale Dye's character says, he needs those two for tonight. He needs every swinging dick in the book. He needs them all out there.
yeah,
And the way he talked to those two guys, I'm like, I remember even at the time, like that has to be a
a real
real
dude. Yeah.
officer. And I talked to him about because that scene stuck out to me even when I was 17. And I told him that's what we talked about on the show a lot of time. I said that scene stuck out to me of all the Platoon. That one, I remember telling myself, as corny as it sounds, I said that's the type of leader that I want to be. And I know that seeing that scene was one of the many pegs that led me down the path of wanting to go into the military. Isn't that it's weird to say that, but
Yeah.
and it wasn't oh, I want to shoot guns and do all no, because you watch Platoon, you're like, why would I want to go through any of that trash?
Yeah. I
But it was that scene that was instrumental for me going down the path to learn about leadership. Isn't that weird? I mean, just
yeah,
that
that's
one little
crazy.
yeah. And I
Well,
told Dale that.
there's so he like Freddie Joe, Dale, eh, or a drill instructor. Let's just say a drill instructor. You and I know plenty of guys that were on the field that were hats or
Mhm.
OCS drill instructors, and they're the greatest guys to hang with. And you know it's a light switch, and it's all acting. And half the time when you're standing up in front of your men, giving them a brief or you're talking, you're acting. If you're
Yeah.
standing up in front of a bunch of staff officers and you're giving a brief, you've got to put on your game face.
Right.
You act. And I see interviewed a guy Carlton Cottle, who's Army, or he was Air Force, and he got into acting. I was on a set with him on some really B-rated movie, and we're the only two military guys. We're playing not NATO. We're playing the bad guys, UN dudes coming into Texas to take your guns. That didn't
Yeah.
end well. I got a shot right in the forehead. But yeah, he and I were the only two guys. Now he's I see him more and more in commercials and in local Texas commercials and on national screen in big movies. And it's an easy way for him, just from what he did as a senior leader, to transition over to the film side. Marshall Teague told me that as well. He's a neighbor, lives down the road. He's famous for Roadhouse, where
Oh
Swayze
yeah,
pulls
pulls
his
out the
throat
throat.
out at the end. And then every time I see him in Armageddon with Bruce Willis, and they're in the space shuttle, and the rock hits the window, and he gets sucked
Yeah.
out of the seat,
Right.
I'll always film it, and I send it to him. I go, "Hey, dumbass, didn't they ever tell you you always got to wear your seatbelt when you're in
Yeah,
the
when you
pilot
said
seat?"
that, right. You said no.
He goes, "It's Hollywood, Taco. Shut up."
I love those little nuanced scenes. I like that. It's weird. Like I'll watch all movies, but like specific in like why is that character? You and I were talking about that. couple months ago when I was at your house. The guy that Akak, what was the real name of the guy that
Oh,
played the
Scott Gibson. He was my
that
very
was
first guest. Oh,
right.
Haldane.
Haldane. Yeah, Haldane.
Yeah, Haldane.
You know, like when they're getting ready to do and Sledge's first. I love that scene where Sledge's first foray into combat. You know, the whole scene where he's getting into the landing craft and
Mhm.
they go down and they're storming the beach. But while they're sitting there and everybody and obviously Sledge is scared and then he looks over at Akak's up against kind of the corner. And like he looks at Akak and Akak just kind of gives him like a little like a kind of a half smile and a nod. I love that shit. I don't know why I love like when movies get that detailed about that. I mean, the average listener viewer probably doesn't even remember that scene, but I love those scenes. You know what I mean? Like where they get that
As a
little
military
nuance.
guy.
Yeah, I guess I don't know.
I
Or
mean,
even like
so many times I think they get it wrong, right?
yeah.
And R.V. Bergen, who was a personal friend of mine years ago, goes, Carl, when I die, I want you to give my eulogy. And I'm like, RV, we got a long time to go on that, buddy. Don't worry about it. And he quit asking me, and I figured he forgot. Well, when he died, his daughter calls me up and goes, Hey, Taco, Daddy always said that when he died, you were going to give his eulogy. And I'm like, How do you
Oh
give his
yeah, I remember you
eulogy
telling me
for a
that.
guy, that was on
Yeah.
the Pacific? Well, I
Yeah.
go to there, and at the end, Rick Perry sitting, Governor Perry sitting down front, bunch of generals, everybody's there. And I'm walking out, and people are like, Hey, great job. Thanks. Nice. Appreciate it. And this guy comes up to me, and he looks really familiar. And it was one of those, you're looking at him like, Where do I know you from? And I thought he was a Marine. And he goes, Hey, I'm Scott Gibson. I played Captain. I played a CO in the Pacific. I'm like, that's why I know you, because I love you, man. You're one of
Yeah,
the
right.
you're one of the few guys that have really portrayed the officer well in documentary, not a documentary, but a series and a war film. And I can't thank you enough for doing that. And that's how we became friends. So he was really my first guest, and it was unfortunately via Facebook. But I've had him, I've had Freddie Joe on numerous times,
Yeah.
and it's a blast every time to have those guys on.
Yeah. I love
But
that
yeah, you
stuff.
ever what? I'll get you hooked up with Freddie Joe. I'll get you hooked up with Scott. If you venture out and you're talking about Marines that make it big in that kind of area, and then guys that play Marines, um, it's always a pleasure to have talk to them because they really researched and did a great job.
Yeah, man.
Well,
I
I
got to
tell you
get
what, brother,
upstairs.
I'll let you go. Hey, listen, tell your wife I appreciate you letting me borrow you. Um,
Yeah, man.
shoot me your address, and I've got a Tall Tales with Taco. I give all
Yeah.
my guests, and actually, I think I hooked you up when you're here, didn't I?
I think you did give me one.
I
Yeah.
did give
So
you
I
one.
have
So
one.
that's
You don't
you
need to
have
send me
one
one.
now, man. That was your pre-order to be on my show.
That's right.
Well, I tell you what, if
Awesome,
you
dude.
hang out for just a second, I'll say goodbye. But I can't thank you
Yeah.
enough for coming on, Rich.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It was so much fun. It's just
And
a blast. I'm proud of what you've done. It was funny watching you take this, from the very beginning when you said to do it. And it's just been fun to watch you continue plugging away at it. Cause most people quit after a couple of months and you've been doing it, for got a couple of years now, had it been, or
no,
how long
I'm
has it been?
actually this is the third season, so I
Yeah. So
started.
3 years. Yeah.
This is the third year.
You're in the third year. Yeah, man.
Well, it's
I
really
mean,
two and a half years I was doing stuff, but 60 I've got yours officially 68, but I've got another 8 to 10 interviews that I've done that were specials,
very good.
and just
Yeah.
enjoyed it.
Keep it up, man. And I appreciate having me on. So just people want to check out doseofleadership.com. They can learn more about the show. And if they
That's
know of
it.
any industry that's looking for someone that I like to get inserted as an arrow in the quiver of an organization to help change their culture. It can be all the way from strategic down to individuals. And so I love talking leadership and helping strategy at organizations. That's what I specialize in, and talking about decentralization. So
And if you're
doseofleadership.com.
and also if you're on Apple Podcast, he's got all of his podcasts on Apple. And also, what other one do you use?
Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher. Those are the big three. But Spotify and Apple Podcasts is what I push. That's where the vast majority of people are. But you can
Right.
find any podcast application, you're going to find Dose of Leadership. But easiest to find on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and of course my website doseofleadership.com. You can listen
Find
to
it
Ball
there.
in there too. Yep.
Well, hey, Rich, I can't thank you enough, brother. And I will see
Thank you for having
around.
me, Taco.
I
Yes,
see you.
sir.
I see you around the schoolhouse for sure.
See, that's right, for sure.
All
Thanks,
right,
buddy.
brother. Have a great night.
You
Hoorah.
too.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed that. That was Rich Rierson. Ned is his call sign. Dose of Leadership. Check it out. Like we said, all Spotify, Apple, everything. And you will enjoy it. The range of interviews that he does is incredible. And if you happen to like Matthew McConaughey, which I've got a guy crush on the dude because I just think he's cool as hell. That was a really cool interview, and I enjoyed the hell out of that. Well, you guys have a great night. Until I see you next time. Adios, hasta luego. Auf Wiedersehen, tschüss, sheshini, au revoir, domo arigato gozaimasu, tano shinde kudasai, ciao, arrivederci, das vidanya, das zdrovia, and everything else. Let's see, which one should we play tonight? I think I'm going to go with Michael Sheriff from our Top Gun interviews when we interviewed all of the original pilots that flew the MiG-28, F-5, and the F-14s and A-4s. Here we go. Love that one. All right, guys, have a great night. We'll see you next Tuesday. Hoorah, Semper Fi.